Hello, Facebook people, and welcome to tonight's Bible study. We will be going over our outline. I hope many of you have printed it off. As usual, let me show you some of our resources. One of the resources is Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, who I don't have his book, but I have watched What is a Woman, and I listen to his podcast every single day. And he has so much information regarding the LGBT community. One of the books, again, No Reason to Hide by Erwin Lutzer, highly, highly, highly recommend. And then this book, Irreversible Damage, the transgender craze seducing our daughters. So this is specifically about young ladies and how the transgender movement has really targeted them. And then here's some neat little things. Pepper, stop that. Well, come get her. Come get her. Then here's the Center for Biblical Worldview. They have a lot of really cool resources that are free. And this one is on human sexuality. It's really good. I was opening this one and looking through it a minute ago. And these are some free resources. So they have a lot of good stuff. Their website is, this is Family Research Council, so frc.org. So you can get to them through there. And then this one also is the Family Research Council, How to Respond to the LGBT Movement. And this one was written in 2020, so it's very recent. This one was written in 2018. So you have some really good information. Yeah?
Would like to add, in case you might know since you studied, but it's LGBTQ
IA. Mm-hmm.
PC2S.
Yes, I know. And I will not be referring it to that. Yeah. I'm not adding the extensions. Two spirit. Yeah.
He's pansexual or polyamorous. What's the C?
I don't know.
Yeah, two. The 2S is two spirit for Native American people or others who feel like they have a man and woman spirit living inside of them. Mm-hmm.
Which is really the same thing as androgynous or pansexual or, yeah. They've got all kinds of names for the same things. Yeah, so no, I will be calling it LGBTQ because I just feel like that kind of goes through everything. All right. Well, the first thing we're going to do is talk about, let me mention this first. Next week is our last Bible study. And instead of going through an outline, we're just going to do questions and answers the whole time. So send me your questions and answers this week. Or, if you have any tonight and you're thinking about it and you're like, hey, I've really been wondering about this. And it doesn't just have to be the things that we're studying here, because I've got information on all kinds of stuff like gun control and why we need the Second Amendment and pro-life issues. So not just abortion. I think most of us here probably know abortion's wrong. But what about capital punishment? Some people say that they're pro-life from birth to, what do they call it? Something from the grave, from the birth to the grave or something.
From conception.
Yes. From conception to the grave. Womb to the tomb. Yeah. I actually do believe that we should have capital punishment, and so there are questions there. So anybody have any questions about that? Or if you have any questions about the Bible, things that maybe Jesus said or something that came across in Scripture, and you're like, well, what about when he said this? He tells us to turn the other cheek, but then, he turned right around and so-and-so did this or whatever. So maybe you have questions regarding that. I actually did a Bible study a couple of years ago called Answering Your Questions About the Bible. So I've actually tackled some of these harder topics. One of them was, for example, why would Jesus curse a fig tree that had no figs? Like, what was it about the fig tree? Like, the fig tree couldn't help it that it had no figs. Why was it cursed? Why did Jesus curse it? So there's just a bunch of different questions maybe you have on some of those topics. Just to throw that out there. So anybody out there in Facebook land, same to you. If you have any questions for me, then just leave a comment or send me a personal message, either way. And I will not out you if you don't want someone to know what your question was, that's fine. It's all anonymous. So I'll just answer your questions, anything that you have. So that's all we'll do next week. So we'll just go completely over questions that you have. All right. So point number 1. What I wanted to do was kind of go over what they are doing right now, and what by they, I'm talking about the LGBTQ agenda. So people who are supportive of the trans movement and the gay and lesbian rights and all of those kinds of things. I think y'all know what I'm talking about in that instance. So it's kind of a overall broad term. And those who are militantly trying to push this in our culture through policies and changes and laws and things like that. So we're not just talking about, your poor little gay neighbor next door who just wants to keep to themselves and live a life and, be left alone. Okay. We're talking about people who are very militant in trying to really make change in the culture. And here's some of the things that they are doing. So, the first point is transitioning kids. And I don't know how aware you guys are of all of this, so we'll just talk about it. If you have any questions, just stop me, okay? Transitioning kids. One of the things that they're doing that to me is one of the most dangerous things that they're doing is that they're taking kids from parents in order to transition them, or they're trying to. So many school districts forbid teachers from outing trans and gender fluid kids to their parents. Teachers who won't go along with this get punished. And I tried to, as much as I could, show you real life examples and things that have been in the news. So at Round Rock Independent School District in Texas, there was a teacher training. And in the teacher training, they had the slides and everything on there, on the source that I got this from, that it was showing that they have to use preferred pronouns for kids. So if a kid comes in the school classroom and says, oh, by the way, I decided I wanted to be she, and it's a boy, and it's been a boy all year, and the teacher's like, well, I don't know if I should be calling you she. Does your mom know about that? Well, now the school is telling them, do not tell the parents. So if the teacher is there and the kid comes in and says, I want to be called she, or I want to be called furry, or I want to be called, zer or zim or whatever, then they're forced to do that, and they're not allowed to contact parents. Strangers and even counselors can be quote unquote dangerous. They can ruin your entire, this is a quote. They can ruin your entire life.
Is it
Yeah.
from the school district?
Yes. This is a quote from the training that they were having. So they can ruin your entire life, get you kicked out of your home by your parents. They're talking to the students, or make other teachers treat you awfully and make our school experience miserable. The slide said. They can even get you killed by outing you without your permission, which they are usually expected to do. So they're talking to the kids are saying, or the trainers are saying about the kids that, hey, if the teachers tell your parents, it could kill you, and you're going to be massively hurt, and all these kids are going to try to bully you and be mean to you, and so it's going to ruin your life and ruin your school experience if they out you. Teacher asked to contact parents. Oh, yeah, so there was a teacher that was a whistleblower that was talking about this, and she said, she asked the school district if, she said that kid came in, wanted to be called by a certain pronoun. This was all new. This had not happened before. And so the teacher asked the school if she could contact the parents, and this is what she said. They told me no, that the child could get beat and maybe not be accepted by their family. I was to accept and to comply. And she said, I cried in my classroom. I cried all the way home. And that was 2 years ago. So this has been going on for a long time, and it just hasn't been out in the news. Nobody really knew it was going on. It was COVID that really kind of brought all of this to the forefront, because kids had to go home to do schoolwork and parents had to help them through it, like a homeschool type of thing. And so the parents began to see this stuff coming up, and they're going, why are they asking you about your preferred pronouns? And now parents are starting to learn about it, but teachers have known about this for several years. The second part here, this is another example. Delegates in Virginia are presenting bills to change the meaning of child abuse. This is new. This is something that's going on right now. And they're changing the meaning, basically the definition of child abuse to include a parent who does not affirm a child's gender confusion. So if a kid comes to school and says, well, my parents, I don't really think my parents want me to transition. Well, then this person who's trying to get this through, her name's Elizabeth Guzman. She's trying to make it to where the parents will be accused of child abuse because they won't do that. So here I've got the details. Governor Glenn Youngkin wants to make it illegal to keep parents out of the gender discussion. So he's on the parent side. But there's been protests and school walkouts. And the school walkouts, by the way, have been people who are doing the agenda. They come in from out of town, and then they convince all these kids to walk out of school. And the kids don't even know why they're walking out of school. I saw another thing on this where they were interviewing the kids and saying, why did you walk out of school today? And they were like, because they told us if we got out we were going to get ice cream or whatever it was, some kind of treat. Yeah. And they were like, oh, well, we don't really care about all that. We just wanted to walk out so we didn't have to do homework or what, like depending on the kid that they were talking to for different reasons, but it had nothing to do with the fact that they even cared about the agenda. But the people that organize it don't care, because what they're really after is just media. They need the attention from the media to say, oh, look at the biggest school walkout. So anyway, there's been school walkouts and protests. And this Elizabeth Guzman, she's a social worker, and she's working to change the definition under the state. And this could include felony charges and kids taken away from their parents. They are already doing this in Canada with what they call their anti-conversion therapy bill. And this includes parents who try to talk their kids out of being another gender. So in Canada right now, it is illegal for a parent to say to their child, no, you're not a boy, you're a girl. And you were born a girl. And aren't you happy that you're a girl? And if they catch you, or if they find out that you did that, that is illegal, and they can take your child away. That's considered child abuse. That's considered anti-conversion therapy, to tell your child that they're not really a boy or not really a girl. Mandated preferred pronouns in schools. That's another issue they're trying to push, is that everybody in school has to have a pronoun. I actually saw a while back, I saw like a little TikTok video of this, I think she was a first grade teacher, and she was bragging in the TikTok video about how every kid in her whole first grade class, or it might have been second grade, it was first or second grade, every single one of them was an LGBTQ child, because they all had particular preferred pronouns. And she was bragging about this, a first grader or a second grader, so 6 or 7 year old child.
They don't even know their sexuality.
They don't know what they're doing. They're just doing what the teacher's telling them to do. That's all they're doing. They're just going, oh, I guess I'm supposed to have preferred pronouns. And so they all just started picking out whatever they felt like.
It's like, oh, it's like a fun nickname thing.
Exactly.
I don't know what that means.
Exactly. It's like a fun nickname thing. Exactly. They're just having a good time. It's like saying, what's your, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? It's like, oh, I'm bragging because every single child in my school wants to be an animal. What? Some who have refused to use these terms, some teachers who have refused to use these terms, they've been fired. Like Virginia teacher Peter Vlaming, I guess you say it. He was fired for not using a male gender pronoun for a female student in 2018. So he was fired for that. Using a biological pronoun or a name on a birth certificate is called dead naming. And this is considered hate speech. And many on the left are trying to have this punished as an act of deadly force. So Twitter classifies dead naming as hate speech. So if you were to get on Twitter and call Bruce Jenner she, or even calling Bruce Jenner instead of Caitlyn Jenner, you would be banned on Twitter for that, because that's hate speech. And hate speech to them means that you are a danger to society. So to them, if you use the wrong pronoun, the quote unquote wrong pronoun, or dead name somebody, then you are performing an act of violence towards someone. Even the medical community has been taken over in this way, and any dissenters will lose their jobs, their licenses, and their prestige. So if a doctor comes in and says, no, I'm not going along with this, I'm not going to try to, agree with a girl who thinks she's a boy, then that doctor is in danger of losing his license and losing his job. Doctors are telling parents that the drugs used to stop puberty or pause puberty is harmless. That's what they're telling them. In What is a Woman? Have any of you seen that? What is a woman? It's really good, by the way. But this doctor was on there, and she said, oh, it's harmless. It's just like pushing the pause button on there on a song. It's just like pushing the pause button on a song. And when a child is ready to go through puberty, then you just unpause it. But here's what they don't tell you. The drugs that they give kids to pause, quote unquote, pause their puberty is actually the same drugs that they give sex offenders to castrate them, to chemically castrate them. So sex offenders, particularly sex offenders against children, they will give them this drug that stops them from having any feelings or to be able to perform any sexual activity at all. And this is the same drug that they're giving kids right now. It often comes with irreversible side effects that create infertility and complications in the kid. So they're giving this stuff to 12-year-olds or 11-year-olds. Yeah, good question. They're giving it to 10-year-olds, kids that have not yet gone through puberty, and they are trying to prevent them from going through it. And here you're giving a 10-year-old an option to take a drug that may stop them from having children for the rest of their life. And they're lying about it. And they're saying, oh, no, it's just like pushing the pause button. Actually, I heard today that one of those medical organizations, I forget which one, they've actually removed that from their website. It used to say on there, oh, the drug is harmless and it won't cause any irreversible side effects. Everything can be reversed. They've removed that now because they can't promise that. They don't even know. I mean, there's been no long-term studies on this because it's never been used before. This is the first time that they're using it on healthy, normal, healthy people. They've used it for unhealthy, like for precocious puberty, for like girls maybe that are going through puberty at like 7 years old. They'll use it on them. But they're using that with the knowledge that this could cause side effects in the future. Now they're just saying, oh, no, it doesn't cause any side effects. It's fine. And that's not true. It actually does cause side effects, and some of them are permanent. Matter of fact, oftentimes it's permanent. They also don't tell you that they're currently encouraging parents to use them on prepubescent kids. And they're saying the younger they are, the easier it will be. So they are actually encouraging people to use this on their 7-year-old, their 6-year-old, any child before the age of puberty. And they're saying the earlier you catch it, the earlier it is to stop, easier it is to stop. So you're taking the word of a 7-year-old that he thinks he's a girl, and you're going to give him these drugs that have life-altering consequences. Some gender-affirming doctors are encouraging use as early as 3 or 4 years old. This information is based on so-called studies. This is what Dawn and I were talking about earlier. Studies are always financially supported. This is what you have to know about studies. They're always financially supported. And most studies are funded by a company that needs this information to support what they do. This is not only legal, but this is a basic practice. So these studies, they have to have somebody pay for them. And so usually a company will come in and start paying for them. Like, for example, you hear the studies about the diet sodas, like Diet Coke or whatever. Well, Coca-Cola pays to have those studies done to prove that there's nothing wrong with diet sodas. So do you think there might be a little conflict of interest there? You know, to try. And it used to be that they didn't have to publish who was funding the study. Well, nowadays they do. They actually changed that law. So now whenever you're reading a study, it has to say who is paying for it. This is one of the ones we were talking about earlier. It said study shows that top surgeries when they remove the healthy breasts from young ladies, top surgery drastically improves the quality of life for young transgender people. So this is what they were saying. So studies show that when you remove the breasts of young transgender people, that the quality of life improves. So like you're making them happier, right? That's what the study says. Well, it turns out, so this study was done on 36 women, ages 14 to 24. So they removed the breasts of a 14-year-old. I put a note there, see, it includes minors. So they were saying for a while, oh, we don't do that on minors. We don't do that on people younger than 18. Well, that's not true. They do it on people younger than 18. Their own study proves it. So they have done it on people younger than 18. This was conducted by Northwestern Medicine, who already conducts top surgeries for millions of dollars. So they themselves already do this, and they're doing their own study to prove that what they're doing is okay. You see, there's a conflict of interest there. All of the victims are from the same area and the same background. So they didn't get a whole bunch of people from all across the country and from different cultures and maybe some poor, some rich, some middle class. They basically are all the same type of girl from all the same area with the same culture and status. And then they followed up only 3 months after the study, and it was on self-reported data. So, which means it's not a blind study. They knew what they were reporting on. They knew that they would be judged, based on what they did. So they themselves only had an incentive to say something positive about it. Because they don't want to say, no, what I did was awful. I should have never done this. Because who's going to read it? Their friend's going to read it. Their family going to read it. They want to be proud of what they did. Plus, it's only 3 months after. So it's kind of like the honeymoon period, of what you're doing. The problem is that when a person has regret, their regret takes place a lot later than 3 months. Did you have a question?
Are they being paid? What is the benefit to the people who are signing up for these quote studies? I mean, is this medical company saying we'll pay for certain amounts of things for the next X number of years?
I don't know
what
that.
incentive are they using? I'm wondering.
There very much could be one.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, this whole group, these 36, were girls who wanted to have this done. And then they had a control group, and I didn't go into the control group here, but the control group also wanted to have it done. But so what they called a control group was girls who wanted to have it done, but were refused. And then they went back and asked the girls, do you wish that you had had it done? Well, obviously they wish they'd had it done. I mean, they were there to have it done, and they were told no. If it had been a real control group, they would have done something different to them, like given them some kind of counseling to help them accept their gender, to help them accept their body, to, in some way help them in a different way. But they didn't. They just basically just let them alone, because they knew then they would be wishing that they'd had it done, because that's why they were there in the first place. They wanted to have it done. But they didn't do anything else. They didn't use any other form of making them okay with it, if that makes sense. But then as you look down through here, 11 of the participants dropped out. That's 1/3. So they were supposed to report back and say whether or not they're happy with it. So it's self-reported, and then 11 of them dropped out. Well, they never said why. They didn't say why the 11 dropped out. Did they regret it? Are they sad that they did it? Are they suicidal? Are they wishing they hadn't? I mean, what happened to those 11? That's 1/3. 11 out of 36, that's 1/3 who didn't even answer. They didn't even respond to the survey. So, but they didn't even mention them. They didn't even talk about what happened to them. Was there any follow-up? And then after that, there was no more follow-up after 3 months. So apparently 3 months is some kind of magical number that they already knew about, because all the other studies on transgenderism shows that the regret actually starts taking place later, and that the highest amount of regret is 10 years after somebody's already transitioned. So after they're 10 years into this, that's when they're most suicidal, and that's when they're the most unhappy, because they've already gone through the honeymoon period and this is who I am and I'm living my truth phase. And then they get to the point where they realize, I'm not living my truth at all. I'm living a total lie, and I'm not who I want to be still, and I've gone through all of this. And so there is nowhere else to go. So then they
unhappiness and dissatisfaction was based on the fact that I'm the wrong gender, and I'm still unhappy and dissatisfied.
Right.
When I change my body.
Right. And they know they're still the same person on the inside. It's like, I am who I am. It's just that on the outside, I've tried to become someone else. And yet I feel exactly the same inside, you know, so they start to realize it had nothing to do with my gender and, or who people perceive me to be on the outside. Yeah.
One more question. Do you know if any of these participants had already undergone any type of hormonal, if they had already been taking any kind of hormones or anything to prepare their bodies for what would happen when that was removed? Because I'm just thinking, your hormones wouldn't have even had enough chance after 3 months, I wouldn't think, to adapt to whatever it's going to alter in your body. Do you
Yeah.
know anything
Yeah.
about
The when they're transitioning people, they always start with hormones first.
that? Yeah.
So more
They
than
were already
likely,
being transitioned.
yeah, more than likely they were already being transitioned, and they always do. They do testosterone on the girls first. Their voice is lower. Well, we go through that in a minute, but yes. So I don't know that the study specifically said that, or if it was just assumed,
Yeah.
because that's usually what happens, the order that it goes in. The third thing, the doctors that are pro-transition are manipulating parents, and they're using phrases like this one. And I've heard this a bunch of times. Do you want a happy little girl or a dead little boy? So they'll say, you know, do you want, because they're trying to convince parents that if they don't allow their child to transition, they'll kill themselves. And they're using that as emotional blackmail to keep parents from stopping their child from transitioning, when actually the exact opposite is the case. Usually a small child especially will outgrow their dysphoria. Usually a little boy is just really curious about frilly dresses or the color pink, or maybe he wants to play with his sister's Barbie dolls, and or he's like, he loves, or maybe he admires his older sister and is like, oh, she plays Barbies, well, I want to play Barbies too. And then parents mistake that and go, oh no, my child thinks he's a girl. And then they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, you know, if you don't transition him, then he's gonna end up committing suicide. He's not gonna be happy. And so would you rather him be an alive little girl or a dead little boy? You know, I've heard that a bunch of times. Well, I kind of said that. Okay. Even the secular studies show that kids generally transition back, even if they aren't confused, and if they're not forced to live as trans kids, they'll just go right back to who they were before, because they're just curious. They don't know anything. It's like you were saying, they don't know their sexuality. They don't know anything. What is a boy? What is a girl? You know, I mean, you're figuring all that stuff out when you're a little bitty kid. Where were all the okay? So one of the things that to respond to that mentality, because they'll say, oh well, you know, millions of kids they want to transition, and so we can't not let them do that because they'll commit suicide. Well, then where are all the dead trans kids up to this point? If kids, you know, if this many kids want to transition and they haven't been allowed to up to this point, then why aren't there more dead kids? Why aren't there a bunch of kids that have committed suicide? Why don't we see the rate of suicide decrease? Instead, it has dramatically increased. Yeah.
Yeah, at my time with people that have mental health issues, those facilities are full of almost all the girls there are some form of that acronym. They're either bi or trans. And like one of my friends that was there has like tried to commit suicide so many times. And I'm like, it's not that all of them are dead. Just all those facilities, that's where they're all at. They're all
That's right.
like,
Yeah.
hospitals and
Right. What she's saying for the online people is that there are, inside the mental facilities, there are so many girls that are there that are so-called transitioning, or bi, or they're lesbian, or they're trans, or whatever, and a lot of them are suicidal. So we're seeing that increase. We're seeing that suicidal attempts of increasing. And if you would think, because they're saying, well, the reason why so many trans people are suicidal is because they're not being accepted. So you would think the more they are accepted in culture, then suicide rates would decrease. But it's been exactly the opposite. The more it has been accepted in culture, the higher the suicide rate increases. And so I have numbers here. This is from the CDC from 2022. Okay, so here's brand new numbers from the CDC. Suicide rates for kids ages 5 to 11, I can't imagine a 5-year-old trying to kill himself, has risen 15% a year from 2013 to 2020. It's the 10th leading cause of death for this age group. That blows my mind. I can't believe 5 to 11-year-olds, the 10th leading cause of death is suicide. For a 5-year-old? That's horrific. And then suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for kids ages 10 to 24. They said they put 24 in there as a kid, but for people that are ages 10 to 24, it's the 2nd leading cause of death, suicide. That you want to talk about a pandemic. That is a pandemic. According to UCLA, and this is also 2022 numbers, nearly 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide, and 9% have made attempts. This is awful. And the fact that they keep using this argument to push this agenda, to me, is so evil and so demonic, because exactly the opposite of what they're saying is going to happen is happening. And yet no one is stopping it. Even the medical community is behind it. And there are many people in the medical community who do not believe this and who do not support this, but they are so afraid of losing their license or losing their reputation or being fired from their job that they won't say anything about it. And they're moving along with it. And to me, that God will judge them. God is going to judge these people. Jesus was very, very, very serious about children. He said it would be better for a millstone to be hung around your neck than for someone to harm an innocent child. And Jesus was extremely protective of children. And for anyone who is not willing to stand up to the medical community or anyone else and allow this kind of harm to kids, they might make it through this world okay, but they ain't going to make it through the next one. Educational books about sexual perversion. Okay, this is another thing that they're doing. The LGBTQ agenda, the people in that agenda, are attacking libraries in schools and public libraries. And they are putting out these very extremely sexual, perverted books. They're graphic, sexual, how-to books with pornographic and perverted concepts and images available in school libraries as young as elementary. They've got these in the elementary school libraries. Teachers in various, it teaches kids how to have sexual encounters in various positions. And I'm trying to be as tiptoe around this as much as I can. Because if I actually told you what these things said, you'd have nightmares about it. I mean, it's so graphic and so perverse. I can't even use some of the language that they used.
On this Instagram account, there was this mom, and she claimed that it was like a graphic novel of this guy who's like my gay shapes and showed his bare backside, and that was like a reading assignment for like a 4th grade.
Yes, exactly. She's saying that this is a 4th grade reading assignment for a book like this. That teaches various positions. It teaches certain orifices and what to do with them. It teaches sadomasochism. I mean, perverted stuff. And it's not just talking about it or the words that they're using. It's images. They're like actually have little illustrations on how to do these certain things with grown-ups. So it'll be a child and a grown man. The words and the images are so graphic and perverted that there have been parents who've gone to PTO meetings to try to read these out. Like, they'll just read a page from a book that they had in the kids' library, and the school board stops them and says, no, you're not allowed to use that kind of language in here. But yet they're allowed to have it in a library, of elementary school kids. Some of them describe and encourage pedophilia, which is a man, older adult with a child, usually a man and a young boy, depicting sexual abuse from an adult. One character in these books describes his experience to a friend. So it's like a fictional book where he's sort of talking about what was happening. And he's describing to his young friend about what a man did to him and what a man asked him to do to him. And in the book, he describes it. It wasn't so bad. It was not so bad. So it paints these activities as normal and even interesting and exciting. as a way to explore who you are sexually. And it's teaching this to young kids. The next thing that they're doing is the drag queens. And of course, you know, a drag queen is a burlesque. It's a stripper, basically. It's a gay stripper, is what it pretty much is. A dancer, a gay stripper, or you know, it could be a pole dancer or someone who just takes off clothes or does a peep show or whatever. The first thing they're doing is drag queen story hour at libraries and schools and churches. Churches are hosting drag queens. A public school talent show, so here's one example. A public school talent show in New York in 2017 allowed drag queens to gyrate and perform lewd acts on stage, including tongue gymnastics, spreading legs, flashing a G-string, and dropping to the floor to enact sex, grooming kids as young as 5. This was billed as a family-friendly event. The show was emceed by a superintendent of the school, and the performer, the actual performer at this talent show was the president of the Public School 96 Parent Association. So this was the president of the school, of the Parent Teacher Association thing. This is who was doing it. It was so awful that parents got up and walked out. They were like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I mean, he was enacting sexual acts on stage without actually doing it. But it looked very, very, very much so real. And they were like, I got to get out of here. Well, what are you doing this in front of my kids? Little kids. I mean, we're talking about elementary school kids all the way up through high school. The Drag Queen Story Hour, that was started in public libraries in San Francisco in 2015, and it now has it has chapters in 27 states and in other countries. One drag queen who reads in libraries in Pennsylvania is named Antichrist. Yeah. And then last but not least, and these are just, I mean, I could have listed 25 different things in public libraries and at schools. I mean, story after story after story after story after story. These are just one or two examples that I'm putting together. And last but not least, I read a story about a drag queen named Miss Pentecost, who joined Allendale United Methodist Church in St. Petersburg, Florida, to host a children's church event and gave the sermon. This guy was actually the person who gave the message to the kids. He's openly gay, and he's actually in the process of being ordained. Right now. So you got Miss Pentecost, the drag queen, is being ordained to be a preacher in a church. And not only is he going to be a preacher in a church, he's going to be a preacher to the children's church. This is where we've gone, ladies and gentlemen. This is where we've gone. Churches bringing in drag queens.
They support that. They see.
Oh, yes. Yeah, they've split because of this. So not every Methodist church is supporting of drag queens, but the half that supports it is going headlong. I mean, they are just jumping right off the deep end. Just jumping right in. What's funny about this one is that the pastor of this church actually said, I was listening to the video of it, and when the drag queen was done talking, the pastor of the church was kind of interviewing him and talking to him, and he was like, yes, he was like, I am just so amazed at how brave you are, and you're doing, I mean, this is what the Bible tells us to do. It tells us not to be conformed to the image of this world, and you're not being conformed to the image of this world. I was like, wow, talk about twisting the scripture. I mean, he was like, yeah, the image of this world is that a man is a man and a woman is a woman. And so now you're not conforming to that image of a man being a man and a woman being a woman. And I'm like, it goes beyond words. Kids are encouraged to participate in the drag queen activities. RuPaul, do you know who RuPaul is? Yeah, he has this he has an event called Drag Con. It's kind of like when you have it's like a big convention sort of all the drag queens. Yeah, like Comic-Con. And but this was supposed to be a family-friendly drag con in Los Angeles. And video shows them on stage with drag. So the kids are on stage with the drag queens dancing and collecting money from the audience. So they're turning the kids into the drag queens, into the, sexualized strippers. Kids at a nightclub in Miami Beach, Florida. Kids are, there's a video that shows kids giving instructions on how to act like a drag queen. They start taking money from strange men, and one guy gives the kids $20. So some sicko out there decided he wanted to really encourage this kid to be a drag queen. The drag queen tells the kids to bend over and scoop up the money off the ground. So they're out there acting like they're selling their bodies. Little kids, talking about 8-year-olds, running around and, shaking it like a drag queen and gyrating and doing their thing. And then you got these grown men. What parent wants their child to be feasted on by these sicko sexual predators? This blows my mind. There's a video of a drag queen at a gay nightclub in Duluth Flame that's the name of the nightclub, Duluth Flame in Minnesota, giving a show to kids and taking money from kids. So this drag queen said, well, I want the kids to know what it's like in the life of a drag queen. So basically invites all the kids to come out to the show, and he's prancing around like spreading his legs and doing his thing and jumping up and down, and the kids are giving the guy money, and he's walking around taking money from the kids. Dallas, Texas, it's called Drag the Kids to Pride drag show at the Mr. Bar. And kids are given the quote-unquote opportunity to perform solo with a drag queen on stage. These are groomers. These are people who are saying, come be like me. Come here, little kid, let me show you. And then finally, a small child, 5 or 6 years old in New Orleans, is seen placing money in the underwear of a drag queen while the parents look on. So the drag queen is actually at this party, at this event, and there's little kids there, like 5 or 6 years old. And he's standing there with basically like a 2-piece, skimpy, what looks like a bikini. And he's holding his panties open like that for the kids to put money in his underwear. Kids. And the parents are just sitting there like, isn't that special? My child is putting money in the underwear of a sicko sexual pervert. That's amazing. So proud, yeah. I was like, what? It is. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I can understand how a child could get mixed up with a predator. Kids are easily manipulated, but to have a parent sitting there like causing it to happen. Drag queen, family-friendly, quote-unquote, carnivals and events where kids are encouraged to dress up and sing like a drag queen, they're even taught to pole dance. And one of the videos I saw, there was a big sign in the background that said, "It won't lick itself." And there was little kids in there, sitting there watching the drag queen. And they're learning. Another one of the events I saw, there was a drag queen standing there in front of a pole, and she had one of these little kids, probably 7 or 8 years old, and was holding him up on the pole, showing him how to pole dance. They're after our kids, y'all. Oklahoma, an event was held in a public park. Over 2,000 people signed the petition to keep this kind of behavior private. So they weren't even saying outlaw it. They were just saying, do your thing in private, okay? We don't want you doing this in a public park. The Republican mayor of this town said, this is a quote from him, the word lewd and lascivious are somewhat subjective terms. Who shall be the arbiter of lewdness? One person's weed is another person's beautiful flower. So who's legally correct? In other words, this mayor, this supposedly conservative mayor, was saying, well, I can't be the one to say what's lewd and what's not lewd. And so who am I to say that this is something that's lewd that they can't do in public, in this public property? on this public land.
It's a coward.
Yes, coward is definitely a nicer term to use. I'm like, wow. I mean, this guy wouldn't even say, who doesn't know that that's not lewd? I mean, what is lewd then? Does lewd even have a meaning? I mean, if that's not lewd, I'd like to know what is. What, do they have to run around naked or something in order to be lewd? I mean,
It's lewd to not support it then. 'Cause-
yeah. One mom, okay, so here's a mom fighting back. When she dressed up as a drag queen and went to the public school meeting. So she got an outfit on, with the fishnet hose and everything. And she asked if her outfit made them uncomfortable. And questioned why. It was obviously, she said, well, if it's okay, if it's making you feel uncomfortable that I dress this way, then why is it okay for a man to dress this way? Why are you saying that it's fine for them to look like that, but you're looking at me with shock? She was like, I feel uncomfortable in what I'm wearing. I'm embarrassed by what I'm wearing. And so why, if we're embarrassed by me, a woman walking in here like this, how is it that you're saying it's okay for men to look like that?
You go, girl.
Good question. Yeah. Another thing they're doing, they're including LGBTQ material in children's programming, kids programming. Disney CEO, did y'all see this video of her? She was bragging on camera about her not so gay agenda and how she put a little bit of LGBTQ here and there and all over. And she was like, and no one is stopping me. Yeah, you can actually see this video of her. They actually have this video of her she's like doing a Zoom meeting. And she's like, nobody's stopping me. Nobody's even saying anything about it. And I just kind of do it wherever I want to. She calls it her not so secret gay agenda. I put not so gay agenda. Not so secret gay agenda is what she actually said. At Disney. So these are all the things that Disney specifically is doing right now. They are forbidding their employees from saying boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen. So, used to go into the park and they'd say, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome, and then they do the big light show and everything.
It's now dreamers of all ages.
Yes, they've changed it to where it's just androgynous. There's no boys and girls, women or men. And no one's allowed to say that anymore. You can't say boys and girls. The dress-up characters, the characters that you walk into the park and you see the princess walking or whatever, they are no longer made to dress like a female or a male. So, like, if Little Mermaid wants to have tattoos and short purple hair, she is allowed to do that. They don't have any. They're allowed to be non-binary. You don't have to, just because you are a female character dressing up like a female character, you don't have to make that character female. You can actually make it a non-binary or an androgynous character. Buzz Lightyear, the movie, the one that they just came out with, the main character is lesbian and kisses her partner in the movie. My Little Pony, the final show of the final season, features a lesbian couple. It's the aunts of one of the, or it's the aunt and the aunt's wife of one of the main ponies. Gravity Falls is another TV show. 2 police officers claim to be in love and jump in each other's arms. The Owl House. Luz Nokeda, is that her name? She's bisexual, is the main character of the show. Star versus the Forces of Evil. In season 2, the Just Friends episode, there are several homosexual couples kissing at a concert. Even Miraculous Ladybug, which we love. There's a very subtle minor character in one of the episodes who wanted beautiful hair, and it's a bald guy, and he keeps talking about how he wants beautiful hair. Well, at the end, he gets his beautiful hair, but he's dressed like a woman. He's wearing like sparkly clothes and has like a Dolly Parton wig on. They never say anything about whether or not he's trans, but he looks very drag queenish in his outfit. The last movie of the new Star Wars trilogy, there's a kissing lesbian couple in the last victory scene. So in the last scene of the movie, they kind of focus in on these different people, and one of them is a kissing lesbian couple. In the movie Cinderella, Billy Porter, who is a man, he plays the fairy godmother, and he wears a dress the whole time. Billy Porter is a big one that they're pushing on a lot of people. The movie Onward, there's a police officer, female police officer in that movie, and she refers to her wife. Disney Plus is coming out with a new show. I think it's like a reboot of an old show that they had called The Proud Family. But now The Proud Family is louder and prouder. So it's called The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder. And all the main characters are gay or bisexual. They're some part of the LGBTQ community. And that's a new one that's coming out. I don't think it's actually come out yet. I think it's coming out in the next few months.
It started.
Has it started?
Because I saw it on Disney Plus.
Okay, yeah, because I know it's coming out soon. And then there are other companies not to be outdone by Disney. So you have Arthur, Mr. Ratburn and Patrick get married in Arthur, which is, for little bitty kids. That's like preschool stuff. Then you've got the reboot of the 1980s She-Ra. There are 23 LGBTQ characters. 2 girls start out as rivals and become lovers. The Peppa Pig, Penny Polar Bear has 2 moms in Peppa Pig. So you're talking about, I know. I hear you. I was like, my kids can't watch anything anymore. Can't even watch Peppa Pig. Not that they would, but they used to. Japanese anime, it's often a gateway into the world of Two-Spirit. We were talking about Two-Spirit a minute ago. Non-binary and other trans paths. I don't know what it is about the Japanese anime. Actually, Japanese anime itself, or the ones that I've seen, have not had anything in there about that. But for some reason, the influencers on YouTube are really, it's like a gateway now. That people get into anime real big, and they end up with the influencers, and then the influencers actually are one of the major ones that push kids into the trans lifestyle is through anime. The Loud House by Nickelodeon, Gay Men Harold and Howard McBride, they're parents of a main character. And then Too Loud, which is by DreamWorks, a boy named Jeffrey in season 1 will return in season 2 as a girl named Desiree. And there's many, many more of these. There is a website called Insider, and they listed 200, of course they were bragging about this, and they listed 259 characters from 70 programs. And these are kids, these are in cartoons. This is just the cartoons, on like television series cartoons, not even Disney movies. We're talking about just, series. 259 characters from 70 programs, representing a 222% increase from 2017 to 2019. Most of these are from independent content makers, but they are targeting children. And these are just the television series, not the movies. So I could go on and on and on and on and on the different ways that the LGBTQ agenda is being pushed and pressured through the culture. Yes.
Oh, I was just wondering, I guess, so some of these characters, they're really small, and they're just what? Because people, these people exist,
Mm-hmm,
and I would say, there's a difference. I think there's a difference between pushing an agenda and actual just the recognition that people in real life that you encounter this way. And so I think that are you saying there shouldn't be any representation of that in any media? I get pushing an agenda is different if it feels like it's just being forced or shown as just you should do this, you know, but would you say it's negative just to have any representation at all ever?
Okay, so the question for online is, she's saying, should we just not have any representation at all, because this does exist and it is real and there are really people like this out in the world? I would say, number one, there's always been people like this in the world, but we didn't put it on TV. And the reason we didn't put it on TV was because it's not something that should be normalized. That is the real difference. So, for example, if you've never seen 2 women kissing in your whole life, and then you see 2 women kissing, you're shocked by it. And you're like, whoa, that's not normal. That's strange. That shouldn't be happening. But if you see it every day, then you go, oh, that's pretty normal. I mean, that's no big deal. And exactly, that's my second point, is that they are doing this to kids. It's not like this is a bunch of rated R movies, where you're, or a mature rated television show. You're talking about Peppa Pig, you're talking about Arthur. And even though there are kids that do have 2 parents, this is something that should be discussed with a parent. So if you go to school and you're like, well, my friend Susie says she has 2 moms. Mom, that's weird. The mom should be the one to talk about that with their child, not Arthur or Peppa Pig or, the Loud House. I mean, these, for little kids, this should not be considered normal. This is not normal. It's actually abnormal. And in nature, it's not even normal. You don't see male horses hooking up and female horses hooking up. You don't see that in any other form of nature whatsoever.
Yeah, that's stupid they do it with animals. Like, that's impossible.
It is kind of impossible. It's like these 2 rats, Mr. Ratburn and Patrick, getting married. No, that actually wouldn't happen in real life.
Yeah, there's like this one, like, I think at one time I heard like these 2 like male penguins or something that were like, everybody was making a big deal of. It's like, oh my gosh, there's 2 men, and like, it's like they're married. And it's like, you're making such a big deal out of it because it's not normal and it doesn't happen.
That's exactly
Like,
right.
It's not something that naturally happens, and because it happens once, isn't like, oh my gosh, animals can be LGBTQ. Like, no. These are 2 random penguins that, like, who knows? They're animals. Like,
Exactly.
It's not a normal, like,
Exactly.
pattern anywhere.
Exactly. It's not normal. That's the thing. It does happen, but it's not normal. And it shouldn't be normalized.
It might not.
Yeah.
They might be cleaning each other or something.
Kids are very impressionable. That's why we don't let kids make decisions for the rest of their lives. That's why people under 18 are so highly protected, because little children are so easily, they're impressionable. You can easily talk them into things. And by targeting little children, you're trying to, they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. That's why they're putting these characters in these TV shows, because they're trying to influence them in that way so that they can say, hey, looky here. This is normal for you to act like this. This is normal for you to be this way. Don't you love Mr. Ratburn? He's such a great guy. And look at him. He's gay. He's not going to hurt you. There's nothing wrong with it. He's just a simple, old, nice guy. And he just wants to live his life and live his truth. And so you can too, Why are they doing that to kids? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, part of it, I think, is that they don't want more babies to be born. They think that the earth is overpopulated. And so they're totally fine with not having any more children. That's also why they're fine with abortion. That's also why they're fine with, they're trying to tell people, even married people, don't have kids. They're trying to tell them all that the world is overpopulated. And so if they can get more and more and more LGBTQ people, they can't have babies, they can't have children.
The more babies are born, like, the more people die, right? Because it's like a life cycle.
What do you mean?
It's like, just because more babies are born, there's also a bunch of 90-year-olds that can die.
Well, yeah, everybody's going to die.
It's not like the more kids we have,
But people are going to stop dying.
yeah, like
Right.
people's lifespan is going to get longer.
It's
Like,
not gonna make it better.
every day
No.
someone is born, someone also dies.
That's
It's
right.
not like
That's right.
But eventually, if the culture buys into this lifestyle, the population will begin to decline,
That's right.
because there won't be babies being born. That's what she's
Well,
saying.
the culture, the people are already dying off. So you've got, you've got, it used to be that people had an average of 2.5 kids. So half the people had 2 kids, the other half the people had 3 kids. So you have 2 parents and they're going to die, right? Well, they have 3 kids. So they've not only made it for their death by these 2, they've actually added one to the world. So every generation has been like that. So another generation comes along and they have 2.5 kids. So some of them are just replacing themselves when they die, and some of them are replacing themselves plus 1, right? Because everybody eventually is going to die. So the point is to have another child that replaces you. Well, if you're it takes 2 parents to make 1 child, at least 1 child. So in order to replace yourself, you have to have at least 2 kids. So you're replacing each one of the parents. Well, what's happening now is that has gone down. The statistic now is that people are having an average of 1 child. So now, once that generation dies off, the next generation is automatically going to be half the size of the other generation.
But like LGBT couples have like implants to have kids.
Yes, they do. And so they are buying, they're renting a woman's, like, so two men want to have a baby, they have to rent a woman's body.
Or just try and get pregnant to, I knew someone that did that. She just, a very good family friend used to be gay, and she just got herself pregnant and then moved in with her girlfriend.
Yeah, that's right. But those two, they don't have a baby together. It's one person or the other has a baby. Like, they can't produce a baby of their own. Yeah, they can't produce a child where each of them are going to have the DNA of that person in that child. That can't happen. They basically have to, one or the other has to adopt the baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They can get some of them carried by
Yeah.
someone else.
I remember
Yeah.
when I was 13, my parents, okay, so I'm really dating myself, but I loved Little House on the Prairie in the 80s, and that was considered an adult show. It was on after 8 o'clock.
Wow.
Because, there was some hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would let me stay up and watch that without my brother and sister. And that was after 8 o'clock. But what's dawning on me is I think a lot of people don't realize with our eyes, our retinas are like a Rolodex. Whatever
Yes.
we see is permanently, your brain permanently stores.
Yes.
So these young children seeing this graphic stuff, it is an agenda.
Yes.
It's an agenda to, I say, brainwash. It's so sad to see that we're no longer protecting kids.
Right.
This is very perverted and debased.
Yes. Oh.
And it's really mind-boggling, just really since COVID, how this has really catapulted. And I have everyone probably has their own theories with COVID, but I think COVID was intentional.
Yeah.
For population control.
Yeah. I do too.
Around the world.
And I do have my reasons to believe
Especially
that.
China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've done some research on that myself, and I agree with you. I think it was done purposely. Yeah, that's right. You can ask some questions about that. Because I do believe that.
For them.
Yes, she was saying that children's minds are like a Rolodex of information, and everything that they see is imprinted on their minds. She was talking about her own childhood and having the impressions of Little House on the Prairie on her mind, and how that's influenced her even now as an adult, and how the things that the kids are seeing nowadays are also impressing them and will influence them as an adult. And they don't even know that this is causing this kind of perversion in their minds. And I don't think that parents understand how much perversion it's causing in their minds, because you have parents that are creating this. I mean, some of the things they're doing would be illegal in any other context.
I think we're just at the point in our culture where these parents, people like their sin.
Oh, yes.
They like this.
Yes, they do like their
not
sin.
Offended by it.
They like their sin, and they justify their sin. And they're trying to convince you that it's not actually a sin at all. That it's actually good because it makes them happy. And in their minds, anything that makes a person happy can't be a sin. It has to be good because it makes you happy. But, of course, the happiness that they're talking about is a short-term happiness. And it comes with great consequence, which actually we'll talk about here in a minute. There is so much. Honestly, I could go on for pages and pages and pages and pages and pages. I mean, I could give you example after example after example. It's incredible. Even in conservative places like Oklahoma and Texas, and in places where you never thought it would happen, it's all over the place. And anyway, but some of the places you can, like, if you listen to, if you're interested in this topic and it's something you feel passionate about, Matt Walsh with the Daily Wire, he does, this is his thing. They recently got Vanderbilt Hospital to agree to stop doing gender transitions on minors and on kids because of the work that they've been doing. And it's a battle, but there are some people that are doing some really good work. And they have a rally in Nashville this Saturday where they're going to be at the Capitol on the Capitol grounds there in Nashville doing a protest against this trans agenda going on. Oh yes, there'll be police there. There will be police there. But Matt Walsh is doing this all over the country. It's amazing. If you have a chance to watch What Is a Woman, it's really good. It's on the Daily Wire streaming service. It's on their app. I think you have to become a member. But it doesn't cost much to become a member just to see the movie, and then you can cancel it if you want to. But it's really good. And then also this book, Irreversible Damage. Amazon tried to cancel it. They weren't even going to sell the book for a while. A lot of people tried to cancel this book because this lady's not a conservative. She's just a journalist, and she just started seeing all these girls transitioning out of the blue, and was trying to figure out what the problem was. But she's interviewed a lot of trans people, LGBTQ people in the book who actually talk about it and who give a lot of details, and they talk about the dark side, really, of the LGBT community and some of the things that are happening inside their bounds that they don't want to talk about because they don't want you to know the dark side of what's happening. So those are some really good resources. So the question is, why does all of this matter? Why don't we just live and let live? Well, first of all, God created male and female for a specific, perfect purpose. It wasn't haphazard. It wasn't evolution. You know, the people who ascribe to this belief system, they're atheists. They don't believe that God has a plan for man and woman. They believe that all this just happened by accident, that it somehow evolved. And it didn't. It has a very specific purpose. God made male and female in his image. So you can't have a full image with just one of the genders. You can't have a full image of God with just man or just woman. It takes both. And that's from Genesis 1:27. It said, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Now, number one there, it says, this scripture has been twisted in some churches so that they're calling God a she. There are actually speakers, especially female speakers, who have heard calling God she, because they're saying, well, God, women were made in the image of God too. Well, that's true, but Jesus called God Father, and he told us to call God Father. He actually said, when you pray, pray like this, our Father who art in heaven. So you want to talk about misgendering? I mean, God calls himself he, and then they come in and start calling him she. I'm like, respect the pronouns, okay? God says he. You can't come in and start changing it.
Yeah, I saw a video of someone trying to tell people what pronouns God used. I'm like, what do you mean? It's in the Bible. It says it. Why are you trying to come up with your own
That's right.
This is what God uses. Where are you even getting that?
That's right. Pretty plain and simple. He says he. Jesus calls him he. And Jesus is a man. He's not a woman. He's not an androgynous creature. Okay. Now angels are not. He is neither male nor female. But Jesus is a male. He's a man. He was a real live flesh and blood man. So when Jesus came, when God came to earth as a human, he didn't choose female. He chose male. Okay. But God does have female qualities. There are several scriptures that actually, I didn't put them down here, but there are several scriptures that talk about God in motherly terms. And so we females are not without connection to God in his being, because God himself is not some sexual being. Okay. He doesn't reproduce. So there's no purpose in him having some kind of sexual quality. But the feminine and the masculine are reflected both in who God is. So,
when a man and woman join and the two become one flesh, I envisioned it, and God is the combination of that joining.
yes.
He's referred to as Father and he, and you have to have a pronoun. It's kind of a being that's like like the joined, unified.
Yes.
uh,
Yes, exactly. And what Dawn's saying is that they're, but to have man and woman together is the reflection of who God is.
It's the union.
Exactly.
It's the union. And
Yes.
I mean, he talks about the bride
Yes.
of Christ.
Yes.
So again, it's
Yes.
reinforcing.
Yes, he's the bridegroom.
And the church
Yeah,
is
the male part.
right.
Yes,
So it's repeated
exactly.
throughout Scripture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So during the 6 days of creation, there was only one time that God said it is not good. Remember everything we were talking about this before? We said, oh, it's good. I did this. It was good. And I made the earth and it was good. And I made the sun and the moon. It was good. And then he came to one thing that was not good, which was not good for man to be alone. So man needs woman and vice versa. We need each other. So you got two gay guys together. They're missing out on something. They're missing the female component. You got two lesbians. They're missing the male component. God didn't create it to be just whoever wants to be with whoever. You have to have in that marriage union, there's got to be a man and a woman, or else you're not in balance. You're top heavy, so to speak. It's like a boat. If you have everything on this side of the boat, your boat's going to flip over. You got to have things evened out. And that's why we need both male and female. Male and female together have two purposes. The first one is to be fruitful and multiply, to subdue the earth and fill it. That's what he tells us to do in Genesis. That's the first thing he tells men and women to do. And this sets up a system of order, and it sets up a system of authority, which is also reflected in Ephesians 5:22 through 33. In addition, the other thing that marriage does is that it is in itself a form of evangelism. So people all the time are saying, well, we need to stick to evangelism. We need to stick to the gospel. We need to stick to, these cultural issues, they don't really matter to the gospel. Why does all this? Yes, it does. It does matter to the gospel. Marriage itself is a reflection of the gospel. And I did put this down completely because I want us to read through this entire thing. This is Ephesians 5:22 through 33. It says, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as, just you're saying, Spring, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. So as you can see here, it's setting up a system of authority and a system of order, and it's showing how marriage is the reflection of God's love for his people. You don't get any more gospel than that. And that is exactly why Satan has come into our culture to attack the family, the nuclear family at its core, particularly the marriage relationship. Because if you don't have a man and a woman in that relationship, then you are destroying the image of God loving his church and the church submitting to God's authority in a loving, mutual relationship. That's what you're missing out on. So when we are going about our business and we are having, we're just being in our families and loving our children and loving our spouses and all that, we are being a reflection of who God is. We are being the reflection of the gospel. That's why it's so important. It's not just a cornerstone of culture. It's a cornerstone of our testimony. So we have to protect this as much as we can. And obviously things are going to happen in relationships. I mean, there's going to be divorces. There's going to be situations where you can't help it. There's going to be deaths in the family. There's going to be, people remarriage. There's going to be blended families. But as best as we can, we need to protect that institution because it is sacred. It's a beautiful institution that doesn't just give us things of this earth. Paul says it right here. This mystery is great. There's something mysterious about it. There's something unique about it. That's why there's so many love songs written. That's why there's poems written. That's why there's been books written and movies, all on the subject of love, of a relationship between a man and a woman, because there's something mysterious there that you just can't really explain. What is it? What is that magnetism that brings us together? And it's exactly the same way with God and the church. He loves us so deeply. He loves us so romantically that he woos us. And sometimes people say, I'll talk to people about God choosing people into his, choosing them and saving them. And I'll say, okay, let's look at it this way. Did you choose your spouse or did your spouse choose you? Who came to who first? And then once the initial thing was made, who made the decision that you would be together? Well, there was just something special there. You can't really say one or the other. I came out and I grabbed you by the hair and drug you around like a caveman or something. That didn't happen. The person that got chosen, that person wants to be chosen. There was just something there. That was that attraction there. And it's the same thing between God and his people. It's like we wanted him, we wanted to be wanted, and he wanted us. And how does it get any more gospel oriented than that right there? I mean, that's an absolutely beautiful thing to know that God loves you with that kind of a love. I mean, that's just amazing to know that you were it reminds me of, what's that Frank Sinatra song? Or it was from South Pacific. I can't think of the words right now. But anyway, I saw you across a crowded room, and there you were. And there was this person, I just had to be with you. I just had to talk to you. And there's that connection there between Christ and his people. It's like he loves us to that level, that he just saw us, even in our ugliness and our darkened state, yet he saw something there within us, within our soul, where he said, I must have this person in my life. I want to make her a part of who I am. And he even says that we are part of his body. Paul here is talking about the one flesh between a man and a woman, which is the same reflection of who we are, a part of the body of Christ. We are one flesh with him. That's awesome. That's amazing. And that comes from Genesis 2:24 and 25. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. I saw this in this little booklet here, the Center for Biblical Worldview booklet. Oops. And he said, God, I thought this was a great quote. God intended sexual desire to draw people to marriage, not merely to sex. So these LGBTQ people are using their sexual identity as their identity. Like, this is who I am to the core, which is what's so tragic about transitioning people, because they find out that their sexuality, their gender, has nothing to do with who they are at the core. They find out it doesn't matter if I live as a man or if I live as a woman, I still am who I am. I still struggle with the same things. I still have the same problems. I still have the same dreams, desires, goals, and still feel like a failure in so many different ways. And it really doesn't matter if I'm a man or a woman, because who I am on the inside doesn't really care about what gender I am. It just mainly cares about who I am. And even though our gender is a part of who we are, and it makes up, certain areas of our personality and our things that we're drawn to, and those hormones, they make a big difference in the way we feel, and all those different things is a part of who we are, but it's not the only thing about who we are. And that's why God gave us this sexual desire. The sexual desire is not to drive us into an identity. The sexual desire is to drive us into marriage. And that marriage becomes a reflection of God's love for his people. It's really a beautiful thing. And marriage is so much more important. And of course, disclosure here, I was in marriage ministry for many, many years, and I still do a lot of marriage ministry and do some counseling in relationships and things. And so I definitely have a propensity to understand and appreciate marriage, but I think most people need to have that kind of appreciation of marriage and what it is. That is not to say that it is not a good thing to be celibate and to be single. I know a lot of single people that reflect Christ every single day. So marriage is not the only way to reflect God's love for his people. Jesus himself was never married. Paul wasn't married. So you have some of the, the greatest people who've done work for the ministry. As a matter of fact, Paul even suggested, don't get married. He said, don't do it. Because when you're married, then you got to worry about your spouse all the time. When you're not married, you don't have to worry about your spouse. You can go and do and be gone and travel and do all the things that you need to do and not have to worry about a spouse. So he actually suggested, he's like, oh, if you can stay single, stay single. But if you can't, it's not a sin. You should go ahead and get married, because being married is also a beautiful thing. So, but in the context of LGBTQ, when they're trying to change these genders and move them from one thing to the other, or to say that no, you can have two people of the same sex having a functional, normal relationship, no, you can't. No, you can't. And it certainly doesn't reflect Christ in the church. And that is one of the purposes of marriage. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Wives, submit to your husbands as the church submits to Christ. This mystery is great, but it reflects Christ in the church. Third, marriage is a form of covenant, which is a blood promise, which lasts as long as the person is alive. And God also made covenant with his people. So the covenant that God made with us, covenant means promise, but it's a special kind of promise because it's a blood covenant and it's a lifelong promise. So when God makes the covenant with us, he's saying, this covenant, this promise that I'm giving to you is as good as long as I'm alive. Well, how long is God alive? Forever. He never dies. So his promise is good to us for as long as he lives. And I thought it would be kind of interesting. I don't know if y'all think this is interesting, but you're here with me, so you're forced into it. To go through what a covenant is. What a covenant actually is, because a lot of people don't really know the ancient origins of covenant, and I think it's amazing. So a covenant is a binding agreement between two people, broken only by death. So when you say, that's why we say in marriage, till death do us part, because you're making a covenant that is only over when you die. Okay. God's covenant with Abraham. So you have an old covenant, which is in Genesis 15, 7 through 21. And they actually, the way that it's written in Genesis, they actually go through all the details of what happens. These animals get cut in half, and then the Holy Spirit comes through and moves between the animals, and there's blood spilt, and Abraham is actually unconscious for part of this. And anyway, so it's interesting. But then when Jesus came and died for our sins, he made a new covenant with God's people. So that's why we call it the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's actually the Old Covenant and the New Covenant is what we're talking about. And what Jesus did was he fulfilled the Old Covenant. So it didn't pass away. He fulfilled it. And when he died in that moment, so it worked, it goes as long as someone dies, right? When he died, he fulfilled that covenant at that time. And now, when he was resurrected, he's made a new covenant with us. And that is reflected when he came and he showed us what that looks like through the Last Supper. There are 9 parts to the covenant ceremony. Now, this is the ancient covenant ceremony that men would do so like a man would do this with another man of another tribe, okay? And this is what happened. First, robes were exchanged. So they would actually take off their robe and their clothes. They would take the clothes off their back and exchange it with the other person. This is a symbol of giving the other person everything you have. So you're saying to them, All that I have is yours, and all you have is mine. We are the same. And in marriage, this is accomplished by sharing all your personal possessions. What's yours is mine. So when you get married, unless you did some kind of a legal separation of that, like a prenuptial agreement type thing, otherwise, the law recognizes that everything that a man and a woman own when they come into the marriage, they share now. They have everything. That's why we have that in the law. The second thing in the ancient covenant, belts were exchanged. And these belts were not just like the belt I'm wearing. They weren't just like some accessory or to hold up your pants. These belts held weapons, and that's what they were mainly used for at the time. This was to make a promise that your battles are my battles. Okay, so they would say, okay, well, if somebody comes and attacks you, we're going to be there. We're going to fight with you. And in marriage, this is the reason why we can't testify against your spouse. So if your spouse is caught doing something wrong and they bring in witnesses, a spouse is not required ever to witness against their spouse. Never. Because your battle is my battle. We're on the same side, even under the law. Number 3, the third step of a blood covenant is a blood sacrifice. The death of an animal is meant to symbolize your own death if you break a covenant. So what you're saying is basically, what has happened to this animal will happen to me if I ever break my promise to you. And this is what happens. It's sort of like kill the fatted calf. Have you heard of that in the Old Testament when they say, let's kill the fatted calf? Well, that's why they're doing that. They're having it's like the blood sacrifice. And in a marriage, this is what's happening when you have a wedding feast after the ceremony. That's when you kill the fatted calf and you put it in your wedding ceremony, your reception. Number 4, and there's 9 steps, by the way. Number 4, ancient people cut the palms of their hands and held them together so that their blood mingled together. This is the blood covenant part of the blood covenant. This is the sign of becoming one. And in marriage, this is what happens in the sexual intimacy that happens between a man and a woman. So you're actually mingling sometimes there is actual blood involved, but you're mingling your bodily fluids is what's happening.
Is God okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
The blood thing? Oh,
yes.
I thought I heard that God doesn't like that.
No.
Are you talking
That-
about cutting of the palm?
Yeah, we're talking about in a covenant situation,
That's
which
not legal.
we're not going to do that anymore. Yeah, we don't do that anymore.
Because
So
I've heard that people talk about drinking blood and stuff as evil.
yeah, you don't want to drink it. They didn't drink it. They would cut their hands and then they would mingle their blood together.
But
They're not literally mingling it. It's just symbolic.
But it's not evil.
No, no, not in this context.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, if this was some kind of satanic ritual, it would probably be evil. But, it depends the context of the reason they're doing it. But in this context with the blood covenant, no, it's not evil at all. Let's see, where was I? 4th? Yeah. I say, okay, so in marriage, this is where you're having consummation of the marriage. This is where the blood is mingled and you become one. The 5th step, each person in ancient times took on a part of the other's name. In those days, they usually incorporated the other person's name into their own. So they would have made like a new name that they both shared that had parts. Each of them, offered a certain part of their name. It's kind of like the Bradgelina or something, would be kind of like that idea. And with marriage, the woman takes the man's last name. So that's the part of the covenant ceremony there. And what you're saying is we're part of the same clan now. We all have the same name. And then number 6, the ancient people would make a scar or some identifying mark as an outward show of this covenant. So they would both have matching scars. They would, nick something in their arm, or they'd make a tattoo or something like that they could say, see, I'm with so-and-so, I'm part of their clan. But in these days, in marriage, you do that with a ring. So that's how we do it now. When I'm wearing this ring on my finger, it says, I'm married, I'm with somebody. The 7th step of a blood covenant is to give the terms of the covenant in front of witnesses. And this is why we have witnesses today. We still do this. Even when you get married to the justice of the peace, you have to have witnesses there to sign and to say, I am witnessing that these two have committed themselves to each other. And the 8th step is the feast or the memorial meal. And then each party would break half of the bread and say, "This is my body, and I now give it to you." And hopefully that sounds familiar, because that's what Jesus said at the Last Supper. And then they would feed it to each other. So, when you see each other at these wedding things, when they go like that and they feed each other and they give something and they take a little wine and they go like that and they drink it. That's actually, I never knew that either. I learned this a couple years ago. Yes, when they feed each other cake and they take they drink out of the wine glasses together at the same time. That is actually comes from this ancient ceremony that they did, prehistoric times they were doing this. So Jesus said, "This is my body, which is given to you. Do this in remembrance of me." And then he took the cup and said, "This cup that I pour out for you is the new covenant in my blood." And that was from Luke 22:19 through 20. The 9th and the final step for the ancient blood covenant was to plant a tree and sprinkle the blood from the covenant on that tree. Jesus sprinkled his blood on a tree, on the cross. And in marriage, this is a baby. It's the seed of the man and the woman that come together. And your blood is actually inside that baby. So that's actually the final step, is to have a baby of the covenant. Were you going to ask something? Oh. So these things from the covenant, now I didn't go through what Jesus did here, but hopefully you can kind of see the different steps that Jesus had gone through to create this new covenant with us. He gave his body, and he did the Last Supper. He sprinkled his blood on a tree. He was the lamb. He was the fatted calf that was slain, he himself. And so Jesus did this covenant with us. But what I really want you to see here is the importance of a marriage covenant and how this is so different from what the LGBTQ community is doing and how they form their relationships. Marriage is not just some kind of side thing that we just sort of like, well, it's fine for you or whatever. No, it is a very, very, very important part of our culture and a part of life in general. And you can't even, there wouldn't be a future without marriage. We can't have babies. We can't have a firm foundation. We have to have this cornerstone of the life that we live. And like I said, it's not like everybody has to get married. That's not the point. The point is that there has to be this element in our culture, in not just American culture, but all over the world. If we don't have this, we have no culture. We have no way to continue going on, to go forward as a people. The LGBTQ warriors intend to destroy the image of marriage because they know that this, and I say they, I don't think they really know. I think they've been deceived by Satan, but Satan knows that to mar marriage and to mar the image of marriage, we're marring the image of who God is. The same is true for fathers. God calls himself a father. Jesus calls him a father. And so destroying the image of fatherhood makes people hate and distrust God. One time, many, many years ago, I was talking to a friend and I was saying, well, because God is a father and he loves us so much. Well, I could say this because I had a wonderful relationship with my father. And, I said, it's like when you're a little girl and you just jump up in your father's lap and he protects you. And she was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And she kind of surprised me. And she said, my father abandoned me when I was 12 years old. So when you're sitting there talking to me about God as a father, she was like, all that does is just make me mad. Because I have no, that's not a positive thing to me. I can't, when I'm thinking about God as a father, that makes me not want to be around God. And ever since then, I have seen how the culture that we live in is marring fatherhood, manhood, and fatherhood because Satan wants to destroy the image of a father. He knows if he can do that, then he can destroy an image of God to people too. So we have to protect these institutions. Secondly, the reason it matters is because the LGBTQ lifestyle is destructive to those who participate in it. It is physically, emotionally, and socially destructive of the trans lifestyle. And then we'll go over why the gay lifestyle in a minute. First of all, it creates confusion. It separates kids from parents, the ones that love them the most. It brings these kids into a cult mentality, which is very difficult to leave. And when they do want to leave, if they regret what they're doing, then they are shamed mercilessly. They're considered traitors and a danger to their community if they disagree or wish to leave. And then if they do decide to leave, they are shunned. You're no longer welcome. You no longer have your friends. So this group of people that at one time was your family, they totally turn their backs on you. And you're not allowed to be around them anymore if you change your mind and you don't want to be with them. Irreversible damage talks a lot about this. Number 2, permanent sex changes in minors, they have irreversible side effects. So this is another way that it damages and hurts people, okay, in the trans community. These changes include high doses of testosterone for girls, resulting in permanent lowered voice, loss of hair, so they go bald, a lot of them, and they have chronic acne. They chop off their healthy breasts. They mutilate their arms. You'll see some of this in What is a Woman, but they have a lady who regrets her transition, and she looks like a balding, heavy-set man, and she rolls her sleeve up to show you her arm because they take, in order to make male body parts, they actually take an entire sleeve of skin off of your arm, and it basically mutilates your arm to where, I mean, you know, the first like several layers of skin are just completely ripped off, taken off of your arm to make a phallic body part. This process comes with enhanced risks and even complications of death, because if you get ingrown hairs and things like that, it can actually get majorly infected and can put your life at risk. Another thing, they're castrating boys and they're creating female cavities that don't function. This also comes with enhanced risks of death because of ingrown hairs. That's one of the more common things that happens. It causes a really bad infection and can get into your bloodstream because it's in these sensitive parts of your body. And that castration can never be reversed. So if a boy is castrated and he decides, I did the wrong thing, and they can do plastic surgery and replace these parts for a visual, but they will never function.
How do they pee? How do trans people pee?
They actually put a urethra through there. They actually,
Catheterizing.
yeah, it's a catheter. It's a catheter. It's a fake tube.
So this is gonna sound weird, but could Caitlyn Jenner have sex with a man?
Caitlyn Jenner did not get castrated.
People that have, and you know what I mean?
They put a hole. They put a cavity there, but it doesn't work the same way that it would work.
You won't really be a woman or a man.
No. Not only that, but there's
Only God can do that.
only God can do that. There are muscles in that part of your body that they can't put there. They can't make them work.
I saw a video one time about a trans person. It was a man who was now saying he's a woman, and they were talking about how transphobic it was. You can't choose to date not date a trans person solely based on them being trans, because that's transphobic. Because it's the exact same as being with a person. If they've had the reassignment surgery, it's the same. You can't even tell the difference, and that's just transphobic. So if you just plainly don't want to be with a trans person, that's transphobic. You can't choose to not be. I was that's ridiculous. So you can't just say I don't want to be with a trans person because that's transphobic.
Right.
Like,
That's right.
solely based off of that. Like, that's, you're not even saying you dislike another person. Like, saying, I don't want to date someone who's trans. Like, how is that, like, that's supposed to be offensive to them?
Yes.
I don't know.
Well, the belief that what they're trying to make people believe is that a trans
Exact same.
woman is a woman. That a trans man is a man.
It's the same.
Yes, they want you to believe it's the same, and that's a fantasy. That's not true at all. Their body doesn't function the same. They will always have medical problems, and that's all part of the reason why their biggest regret, the regret that they have. So they have an immediate euphoric reaction. Euphoric means they're really happy about it. A honeymoon period for the first 6 months or so. At that point, it starts to go down and down and down. And the regret for most of them is at its peak 10 years after they've transitioned. So, and they're most suicidal 10 years after they've transitioned. So most of the suicides that you hear about from trans people happen 10 years later. So they just get worse and worse and worse and worse.
Is that 10 years pretty consistent, whether the transgender, the drugs and the surgeries happen when they were 10 or 20 or 30? Is it still pretty much a 10-year?
Nobody knows.
Well, we don't.
Yeah, nobody knows because they haven't been doing this on minors until recently. And now they're going to, and there's going to be so much, that's what's scary about it, is that the suicide rate is going to be incredibly high in 10 years. And because they can't create a person. They can't, if that person, okay, so they can live as a woman if they want to. They can have cavities put in their body. They can have breasts attached to their frame. But when they die and somebody digs up their bones 100 years from now, they're still going to have XY chromosomes. They're still going to have female DNA. It goes all the way down to every single cell in your body. So there's no way to change that. It's not possible. It's like chopping your leg off and putting on a prosthetic leg. It's not going to function the same way. It might look like a leg on the outside. You might be able to put all the flesh on it that you possibly can. It's not a leg. It's not going to function like a leg. You can't change the nerves, and maybe their hope is that one day they will be able to do that, but it's impossible. You can't change every single cell in your entire body.
Right, because God didn't design it.
That's right.
It's man-made.
That's right.
And so God's design is a perfect design. Even when things don't work as they should, that's part of sin. But I mean,
That's
in
right.
this case, you can't replicate
That's
God's
right.
design.
That's exactly right. You can't replicate what God designed. You can't.
I don't understand how they think that that's how it's supposed to be if you have to make that many alterations to be like that.
It's seeking for something that you think will make you happy. You've bought into a big, big lie, and you're seeking something, and you're seeking it because you want pleasure.
That's right.
And you may find it temporarily, like she was saying. Like, there's
Right.
a temporary satisfaction, but ultimately there's a void.
That's right.
You know,
Because
and like,
because we don't find our identity in our sexuality.
But those kind of people do, and like that's why people like misgendering, like it gets them so much because like that's what they're all tied up in. That like
Yes.
one person
Yes.
disagree with them, they can't even handle it.
That's right.
It's like one person disagreeing with them just like completely dismantles their entire person. I'm like,
That's exactly right.
I can disagree.
It's just like the Emperor Has No Clothes. Have you read that little kid's book? The Emperor Has No Clothes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So everybody says, oh yes, your clothing, you're so beautiful, it's so wonderful, but he didn't have any clothing on. He's walking around naked. And then finally, one little kid says, the Emperor has no clothes, and then it's out. So that's all it takes is for you to misgender somebody and to go, oh, it's a he, and then it's all over. Now everybody feels like an idiot. Because they're like, I knew it was he, but still was so he, and that's how it is. I mean, it's you. The only way that they can pass it off is if you buy into the game. If you're not willing to play the game, then it's not passable. It kind of reminds me, there's a video out there of a guy who, where was he? It was a transgender woman. So it was a man dressed up like a woman. And I think he was at a Sonic or something. I mean, he was at some fast food restaurant. And the guy, the manager comes out and says, well, how can I help you, sir? And he was like, sir, you're calling me a sir? And he was like, oh, I'm sorry. He goes, well, what do you want me to call you? What do you want me to call you? And he was like, what do I look like? What do you mean, what do you want me to call you? What do I look like?
I don't know.
And the manager was like, are you asking me what you look like? And he was like, well, yeah, what do you think I look like? And he goes, well, I think you look like a man.
It's so funny. It's like, why are you being mad based off of like general assumptions, like you do with everyone, on like what you actually look like?
Yeah,
I thought it was
exactly.
a man, I'm a fairy. How could you not?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't even talk about furries, people that think that they're kitty cats and stuff. I mean, I heard one video where a girl thought she was a doll and she kept saying that she was forgetting to blink. She forgot to blink and then she forgot to breathe. And I was like,
What? You can't forget to breathe. How are you even living?
it's all a show. It's just a show. That's what's sad about it, is that people are so desperate to define themselves as something unique and different and, something special, that by trying to find their specialness, they've backed themselves into a corner that they can't even live in. I mean, a doll? How are you going to pull that off? Never blinking? How do you even do that? I forget to blink. How do you forget to blink? It's like forgetting to, I don't know, for your heart to beat or something. So here's a story. This girl's name is Casey, and she's a girl who transitioned at 16 years old and took testosterone for 5 years. And this is what she said. This is from the Reddit transition regret forum. But she said, I'm too far gone. My voice has gotten deeper over time, and now it has settled. My hair is thinning, and it keeps getting worse. This is what it took. This is what it looks like for a woman to be on testosterone for 5 years. Oh no, this isn't from Reddit. This is actually a TikTok video. And she said, this is what it looks like for a woman to be on testosterone for 5 years. And she said, she was like, I don't even know what to say, but just be safe out there. And she was trying to sort of warn other girls, like, this is what's going to happen to you if you take testosterone for 5 years. Your hair's going to fall out. You're going to gain weight. She was kind of just showing, like, no girl who wants to transition to a boy imagines herself as a balding, beer-bellied old man.
They think they're going to be hot.
Yeah, they think they're going to be tough and cool and a model and everything else. And the reality is that there are side effects to testosterone, very real side effects. And you have a deep voice, and you're going to have acne, chronic acne, and you're going to have a beer belly, and you're going to have, all these things that testosterone causes in people. I mean, obviously a beer belly is caused by beer, but my point is that guys gain it around the waist, and girls gain it in different areas than guys do. And so you're going to end up gaining your weight where guys gain weight. You're going to have an Adam's apple. You're going to have hair falling out. And most of these things are not reversible. They're hoping that some of them can be reversed, but they don't really know. They don't really know. But here's the thing, is that Casey came out to say that on social media just to kind of give some other girls. She didn't even say anything. She didn't even say trans is bad or, don't trans yourself. She didn't even say any of that. She was just saying, I just want you to know the facts and be careful out there. And she was bullied relentlessly on social media by people who were saying, you're a traitor and how dare you? I mean, just on and on and on, talking about what a horrible person she was. That right there to me would make somebody more suicidal, I would think, than stopping them before they start. After they've transitioned and they're regretting it, and then their friends and people like them coming out and saying, we hate you, you're a horrible person, how could you say all this, you're a traitor to all of us, that is more hopeless sounding to me than anything else.
It's where all the family and child developmental people are right now, because Like what side of the issue? Yeah, like you are robbing kids of their childhood. And most kids don't get into reality till they're, later adolescence.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's interesting how this is really
I know.
taking
Well,
shape so
they
fast.
can't. They either are quiet and they don't talk about it out loud, or they are just on board and they're just on the train like everybody else.
Well, I think they're afraid of a lawsuit.
They are.
Afraid. I mean, people are afraid to take a stand against this because
They're afraid of losing their
yeah,
licenses.
the community is so just in your face. And
Yes.
that they will.
It's not just the community. It's in all the institutions.
Yeah.
They're pushing this on
Well,
people.
it's been very strategic. It's been going on for years, but now you have them in all facets.
Oh yeah, I have a friend who's a psychiatrist, and she's like worries about it all the time, and she speaks out against it because she's like, it's my conscience. I have to do what my conscience tells me to do. But almost everyone in her industry is for these types of procedures, and they're like, no, I'm not gonna lose my job for it, So they just go along with it. They're like, hey, they're saying it's good for the kids now, so that's what we're gonna say. We're gonna say it's good for the kids now. It's sort of like passing the buck. I didn't say it; they told me to say it, so I'm safe. And so many of them are just taking the safe road, and they won't speak out against it.
I think too, I have a friend of a friend she lives in the Midwest. The daughter has transitioned, had mental health issues. A girl wants to be a boy, and so like when you share this, I'm like, I know the person.
Yeah.
I haven't met them, but it's like it's true. The trend. What's my train of thought? I'm sorry. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. It's so when kids start throwing out, well, I'm gonna kill myself if you don't let me do this. Kids are starting to overpower and tell their parents how to parent.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
Not only that, but there are influencers on the internet, and so if a child, so it happens two ways. Either number one, a child is interested or is curious about transitioning, and so they'll go look for it's like a mentor online or on YouTube. They're all over YouTube, and they're called influencers, and there are transition influencers. And so either number one, they'll look for them and they'll seek them out, or number two, they'll just kind of run across them through, like I was saying, through the Japanese anime and the cosplay. For some reason, it's like a filtering system that gets them into this transitioning stuff. So they'll run across them somehow. And these transitioners actually coach them to tell them that they're going to commit suicide. And they'll say, here's how you get transitional hormones, and here's how you get past your parents. You go to your school counselor, you tell her you're trans, you tell her you're going to kill yourself, and then it tells them exactly how to get into the system, how to bypass the system, how to bypass your parents. And it'll tell them, here's how you talk to the counselor. The counselor will want you to do this, this, and this for 3 different sessions. Well, all 3 of those sessions, you tell her, I'm suicidal, I'm going to kill myself. Give me the testosterone, give me the whatever, the estrogen or wherever it is that they want. And they coach them exactly how to do this. So this whole thing about kids are going to kill themselves isn't even pure. It's something that they figured out that can get their way. It is. It's a way of manipulation. So yes, there's a whole lot of talk of suicide within the trans community, but they're being coached to say those things.
Well, that's what happened with this family. They're even in the church. But she said, we've decided to let her do this because, or we're going to lose our kid.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
sad.
It is. It's manipulation. It is.
To the mental hospital, like some mental hospitals, when they tell them that when you have your family session, the therapist, you're like, your kid, this is what your kid wants, let them do this. And some mental hospitals show movies like Love Sign and condone that.
Yes.
And it's like,
It's kind of like when your 5-year-old has a tantrum because you won't let him get into the cookie jar because you're going to have dinner in 10 minutes.
Right.
Well, no, you need to have a healthy supper.
Yeah.
And these kids are having a tantrum, but throwing out, I'm gonna kill myself.
Right.
If you don't let me do this.
That's
But
exactly right.
They're searching for something.
That's exactly right.
And that's what.
It's a cry for help.
It is.
It is.
There's an issue, and the issue is
Yes.
we're wanting to be God.
Yes. That's right. That's right. Well, here's a couple other stories. There's a 17-year-old after just, and this is how she was feeling after being on testosterone. Her voice is changing. She said, "I hate my voice. I ruined my life. The doctors ruined my life. I'm legitimately suicidal as a result of decisions I made as a kid. And I don't know how long I can keep doing this." And this is how she's feeling just after her voice getting deeper. And she, sounded like a boy, a man. And another girl, I thought this was the most tragic of all. This girl, she had top surgery at 14 years old. So she had her breast removed at 14. She said, "I'm a 17-year-old girl with a flat chest, a deep voice, a visible Adam's apple, and some facial hair. There's no reason for me to continue to live. I destroyed my life. And all the hope I have is stupid for me to have. I don't think any person will ever want to date me. People used to be into me, but not anymore. There's nothing I can do to keep from remembering my past and how much I miss it. I was just a kid, and I just needed someone to help me accept myself. My therapist didn't question my transness. I can't stop thinking about the life that I could have had. I love my mom. She's an amazing mom. The first time she stopped me, but the second time she was also brainwashed and sadly thought that when all these professionals tell you that it's the right thing to let your kid transition, then it must be the right thing. She thinks it's all her fault, but it isn't. I want to kill myself, but she'll be even more miserable. How can I kill myself?" So she's asking this on Reddit. "How can I kill myself, but also let her know that I want her to be happy? I'm 17. Why do I have to think about ending my life? There's just too much to handle." And she's so right. Like, she shouldn't have to be dealing with this at 17-year-old. She shouldn't have had someone, she says it herself. Someone should have just helped me accept myself. And I would have been okay.
Drink and smoke and drive, which are bad, but are not nearly as powerful as this.
Yes.
And we're letting kids make this decision.
Yes.
There's a reason we don't let them do those things.
That's
They're
right.
not mature enough to decide.
That's exactly right. Kids don't know what they want to do. They don't know how they're going to feel. I mean, at 14, they're totally unhappy about, transitioning and going through puberty. Who likes to do that? Nobody does. But when you're 24, you're like, wow, I'm really glad that I had to go through all that when I was 14.
This is almost like a new form of abortion.
Yes, it is. It is like a new form of abortion.
Your life.
Yeah. If they can't get them before they're born, they're going to get them later on, and destroy their life. That's exactly right. This regret often leads to suicide, which is most dangerous 10 years after transitioning. The danger of suicide is used as a weapon to bully parents into accepting kids, but the danger of suicide is greatest after transition when kids feel it's too late and they can't go back, like we were saying earlier. So really, parents should be worried about suicide after a child transitions, not before. Beforehand, that's when you can actually stop them and help them to be happy with who they are. The progressives, though, they don't really care because assisted suicide, which they now call medical assistance in dying, or MAID for short, MAID, is the next big moneymaker. Okay? It's so popular in some parts of Canada, it's the #1 cause of death in areas of Canada. It's legal in Canada.
I think it's legal in 11 or 17 countries.
Yes, it is. The laws are becoming, but Canada is the kind of the premier, like the main one that's doing the most aggressive stuff. The laws are becoming more and more lax, and the idea of assisted suicide for kids is the next stage. That's the next thing they're floating. It's already being debated and discussed in Canada right now. They're talking about it right now. Like, how young is too young, like, for kids. Children. They're going to help them commit suicide.
I mean, what kind of
Mind-blowing.
Whatever happened to the code of ethics? Like,
They've talked themselves into all kinds of things. This person's too miserable to live. They're going to commit suicide anyway, so we might as well help them do it in a noble way. I mean, it's the slippery slope. And everybody says, oh, there's no such thing as a slippery slope. That's a fallacy. It is not a fallacy. The fact of the matter is, once you say something's okay, well, then why not this a little bit further? Way back when people were talking about euthanasia and saying, well, these are old people who are suffering and they're 95 years old, and why not just give them, a painless death and put them on some kind of coma-inducing drug and then let them pass peacefully into the night? Everybody say, oh, that's compassionate. These people that are dying of cancer, why don't we just go ahead and give them a compassionate death? Well, you can use that same logic all the way down to a 10-year-old. Well, he's miserable. He's gone through this transition. He's not happy about it. What about his mental health? His mental health is miserable. He's going to commit suicide anyway. So, it's this whole slippery slope argument. If you don't ever say, no, this is right and this is wrong, and put a line in the sand, because you can always debate where it falls on that line. But everybody tries to gray out everything. Huh?
God gives, and he's the one that takes away.
That's right. That's right. God is the one who is the arbiter of death and life, not us.
Yeah, he numbers our days.
That's right. He numbers our days, and that's not up to us to decide. But, they've talked themselves into it as if to say this is the most compassionate thing. That's why the love your neighbor deal can be, you can't just take that at face value. This has nothing to do with trans life, or LGBT stuff, but Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is putting up billboards all over the country saying, come to California to get your abortion. And underneath at the bottom of the billboard, it says, love your neighbor as yourself.
What does that mean?
What about that movie that you're gonna
If you really love your neighbor, you're going to let them come to California to get an abortion, I guess. That's how people are using that verse. They're using it now as a weapon to do exactly the opposite. That's not loving your neighbor. That's hating your neighbor. But he's using that to manipulate. Satan is very, very good. Even when Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, what did Satan use to tempt Jesus in the wilderness? He used the word of God. He said, has God not said? Has God not said? What did he say when he tempted Adam and Eve? Has God not said?
That's why you need to read the Bible.
That's why you need to know what the Word of God says, and not just cherry pick verses, but you need to know the whole context of God's Word. That's why we do this stuff like the biblical worldview stuff. Because if you just listen to, well, the Bible says don't judge. Well, do you know any other verse besides that one, or is that the only verse that you know? What does that mean within context? Because the Bible also tells us to be discerning, and discerning is another word for judging. So the Bible tells us not to judge, and the Bible also tells us to judge. It tells us that in two different contexts. So what is the context? And what is it that they're trying to say? What's the heart of the scripture instead of the letter of the scripture? You see what I'm saying?
Don't feel like you're wrong, I'm right. It's more like, I think your decision is wrong, but your actual heart behind it, I can't say.
Yes, there are certain times where we judge, and there are certain things that we don't judge. And sometimes it's God's place to judge, and sometimes it's our place to judge. So, just like anything, we've got, it all depends on the context of the situation that you're in. And we need to know those scriptures, or else they can be used by Satan. Satan knows the Bible better than we do, and he can use God's word to manipulate us and to manipulate our feelings and to manipulate our thoughts on certain things. So those are some of the dangers of the trans lifestyle. Here are some of the physical, emotional, and social destruction of the gay lifestyle. A medical report: the gay and bi lifestyle, especially for men, is hard on the body. So I can't get into the details of what it does to a man's body because I don't want to impress things on your mind, especially on these ladies' minds. But to suffice it to say, there are levels of perversion in the gay lifestyle that cause problems in a body. Things get put in places and they're not supposed to go. Stretches out things are not supposed to stretch out. Certain parts of your body are taking abuse in ways that they were not meant to be taken. And these things cause long-term problems. They cause long-term problems in your digestive tract, in the certain functions of your body and what they can and cannot do. So suffice it to say that there are very severe medical problems that come with the gay lifestyle. The perversion of the gay and bi lifestyle also include torture and sadism. Sadism is when you receive pleasure from hurting other people. Sexual pleasure, like a sick, psychotic type pleasure. And the gay and bi lifestyle encourage that type of behavior. Obviously, not all gay and bi people, I'm sure there are some out there that don't want to participate in that kind of stuff, but the culture as a whole very much so encourages it and celebrates it and supports it. Sexually transmitted diseases, they are rampant through the gay and bi communities.
No way for a woman to be protected by that also. Like a man could, but woman can't.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Gay
And
women
even
can't be protected.
even men who try to protect themselves from it most often cannot. Even the monkeypox thing where they were trying to make that a normal deal, that was mainly a gay disease. Almost all who identify as gay and bi have been abused in some way, especially sexual abuse. And, when you're talking about the trans community, many of them also have been sexually abused as children. And this is just a way that it manifests itself. This is both physical and emotional damage. Progressive numbers, so people that are in the medical community who are, who support the gay and trans agenda, they put this number around 35%. So even they have so we're talking about over 1/3, according to the liberal and the progressives, will tell you that the gay, homosexuality, people who participate in homosexuality, around 35% of them have been sexually abused. But many who counsel homosexuals who wish to change, so like people who are in the homosexual community but don't want to be homosexual anymore, they're putting that number between 75 and 90% of those people have been sexually abused as children. In 2009, there was a report prepared by the Bisexual Health Summit, and it revealed that 74% of bisexuals had been sexually abused as children. 74%. And those are just the ones that remember it. Okay? Many of them had been abused. Many people who have been abused as children, they don't remember it happening. It was a traumatic event, and they forgot about it. And so with some counsel, that's why a lot of the counselors who work with them, they'll put that number between 75 and 90%. Because once they start digging into their background, they start to find out that there was sexual abuse or mental or verbal abuse there that person either didn't remember or didn't realize was actually abuse. They thought it was normal. They thought everybody dealt with it that way or had that in their family. And then they found out they didn't. So even though the progressive people will tell you it's 35%, they can't deny 35%. I mean, so no matter how you look at it, 1/3 of them at least have been sexually abused. But probably it's up in the 90%, maybe more. They just don't realize it. Lesbian feminist and academic Camille Paglia, she said, "Every single gay person I know has some sort of drama going on back in childhood, something that was happening and we're not allowed to ask about anymore," because they are very adamant. They try to tell you that there is no connection between the gay, trans, lesbian, bi lifestyle and sexual abuse as a child. They're trying to tell everybody that, but the numbers are saying something different. There is a very clear connection between abuse as a child and the homosexual, gay, lesbian, trans lifestyle. There is a very, very clear connection. Yeah.
I saw something one time, it was like a video, like it was, someone had interviewed someone who, like it was a girl, and whenever she was younger, she decided she wanted to transition to being a boy. And it was right after her dad had just left her life, like he just left her family, like not been there anymore. And so it just been like her and like maybe her brother or like her mom or something. And they asked, like, do you think that your dad maybe had any effect? And they were like, no. I was like, are you kidding me? Like your dad
Yeah.
leaves your family all of a sudden, and you're like, I want to be a boy. It's like no correlation there.
Yeah.
Like no, like.
See, that's what they don't
Doesn't make
understand.
sense.
That's where
Like-
people don't understand the correlation themselves. They can't see, you know, when you're in your own trauma, you can't see how that is affecting you emotionally. But when you're outside of it and you're somebody looking in, you can clearly see that it was affecting it, you know. So when you're asking these people to self-report, you know, well, do you think that your abuse as a child has anything to do with the fact that you're a gay man today? Oh, no, it didn't have anything to do with it. When you're looking back going, yeah, I think maybe it did. So if you can get these guys and girls into some kind of counseling, a lot of times they can work through these issues and figure out, oh, that's why I did that. I wish I could remember his name. He does a lot of counseling, and he used to be trans, and he lived as a woman he was actually a married man and had like 2-3 kids, married to a woman, and then he just decided one day, you know, I want to be a woman now. You know, I've been wanting to be a woman my whole life, and I want to be a woman, and I cannot remember his name. And then he lived as a woman for like 7 years, and he finally realized, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's just I'm not any better, you know. I'm still just who I was before. Well, turned out his grandmother, when he was a little boy, little bitty thing, was dressing him up in a purple chiffon dress and prancing him around and telling him how cute he was and how adorable he was, because she always wanted a granddaughter and didn't have one. So what did she do? She tried to turn her little grandson into a girl. And so his whole life he grew up thinking, well, I'm not good enough, and if only I were a girl, then I would be good enough. And I would be looked up to and admired, and I could wear beautiful chiffon purple dresses, and everybody would look at me and think of how great I would be. And so he left his wife and his children to go be a woman and transitioned well, you know, as far as well can go. He started a whole new life and became a woman and lived as a woman, and everybody accepted him and everybody was great with him, and he knew he was empty inside. And now he has transitioned back to a man, and he talks a lot about, you know, the problems with that and how you can never really be a fully functioning man ever again. But now he counsels other people who are who want to detransition and go back to being what they were before. And a lot of the information, I was talking about the statistics and things, he was talking about that, about how all these people have this traumatic abuse as a child. You know, he didn't think at the time that his grandmother was sexually abusing him. And then later on, he grew up and through counseling, saw the connection there between him being a little boy, being dressed up as a girl at grandmother's house, and wanting to be a woman as he grew up. But at the time, he didn't see that connection. He didn't really see that they were connected at all. So that's where counseling really helps people like this, because they can actually go back through their past and find out when it was and where it was that caused them to start thinking this way. Where were we? Part of the homosexual lifestyle for men is the idea of man-boy love. They celebrate this, that boys want to have sexual relationships with grown men. And here's the twisted part, is that people who celebrate that pedophilia will actually say it's the young boy's fault because they want it. They want to have sex with a man, is what they say. And the fact of the matter is that those who have been abused tend to abuse other people, and it's a cycle. So if a man was abused as a little boy, he is more likely to abuse a boy when he grows up. And then the little boy that he abuses will grow up and abuse another little boy. But they call this man-boy love, and they actually encourage it. And they encourage it because they think that the little boys want this. When in reality, a little boy is going to be curious about his body. And the moment that a little boy, especially a little boy, is sexually abused, and this is true for girls too, but boys seem to be more affected by it. But for little boys, they like the sensation, the feeling that it gives them, and it's an awakening. And when that happens, they crave it. It's kind of like, when you have it, it's like a drug. Yeah, like you get an appetite for it. And so even though they know it's wrong, it's something that they still want because it has been prematurely awakened in them. And because they feel ashamed and they don't know where else to go, they go back to their abuser. And the abuser convinces them that this is love. And that it's normal and that it's okay. And so they grow up with a misunderstanding and a perversion of what real love is. And that's really hard to undo in a child. So, it's not healthy. The other way that it hurts them is in emotional pain. And they have multiple partners and hookups. And the world really tries to paint this as, well, we just want to be a monogamous couple, just like men and women. And they'll use the divorce rate against us and say, well, look at all of these men and women that have divorced. And so you talk to us about, multiple partners, blah, blah, blah. Just because there is pain in one part of lives, who wants to say, yay, I've been divorced, yay, I've been married 25 times, yay, that's exciting. No. Divorced people are not excited about being divorced, and they're not excited about being remarried 25 times. But yet in the homosexual community, it seems to be a rampant thing. I mean, you've got people who have partner after partner after partner after partner after partner, and it's normal to see that happening. So it's actually not the norm for a homosexual couple, male or female, to be monogamous for their whole lives. That's actually really rare. The norm is for them to have multiple partners and to be cheated on multiple times, particularly with the males, because the males have a sexual appetite. Part of the beauty of a male-female relationship is that females tamper that sexual drive in a man. But when you have two men together, then they're constantly looking for that all the time. So they have wandering eye, they have multiple boyfriends, they'll cheat on each other. It's just part of that lifestyle. And this leads to heartbreak and distrust and the inability to bond with people and bitterness and just a complete sense of loneliness. Like there's no one who's ever going to have a covenant with you, because you're not going to have a covenant in a male-male or a female-female relationship. It's not possible. And then there's the spiritual destruction. There's a mentality, once someone gets into the homosexual lifestyle, that it's impossible to repent. And this is one of the lies that Satan has told this community, that once you're there, once you've gone there, you can't go back. That's what he'll tell them. And he puts a sense of guilt on them. The Bible describes Satan as the one who condemns. He's the one that accuses. He's the accuser of the brethren. That's what the Bible says. And so that guilt that you feel, that is a tactic of Satan. He will point to you. He uses a mirror of your sin and says, look at you, look at you, look at you. No one could ever forgive you. God will never forgive you. No woman will ever love you now that you've been with a man. No man will ever love you now that you've been with a woman. He'll use those things and tell them lies. And so spiritually, they suffer because they feel like it's not just the church. And everybody say, oh, the church has been so mean to the homosexual community. Actually, it's not the church that's been mean to the homosexual community. I'm sure there are some here and there. Who has been mean to the homosexual community is Satan. Satan comes in and whispers in their ear and says, oh, no, God will never forgive you. oh no, those church people, they'll never accept you for who you are. That's not the church that I know. The church I know accepts people. The church that I know says if you're repenting and you're ready to come in and you're ready to live in a way that honors God and you're going to try hard and you're going to work hard to do that, yes, come on in. Come into the fold. Every church I know is like that. But the devil doesn't want them to come into the church. He's going to sit there and tell them, no, don't come in. They won't accept you. They won't love you. There's an immense amount of guilt. Most of them know that it's wrong. They know it's unnatural, but they don't know how to get help. They don't think they can get help. They think, well, I've been born this way and there's no way I can change. That is not true, even if you have been born this way. I do believe that there are people who are born with a propensity to certain sins, just like there are people who are born with an anger problem. There are people who are born that are kleptomaniacs and they want to steal everything that they see. Does that mean it's okay to steal things just because they're born that way? No. Is it okay to murder somebody just because you have an anger problem? No. We're all born with a certain propensity to sin in some way, and yet we are not allowed to just live no holds bar according to however our sinful nature drives us to live. Nothing is allowed to be that way. If I'm a guy and have an anger problem, is it okay for me to beat my wife every day? If I just think, well, she made me. No, that's not okay. It's against the law. You can't do that. It's the same thing here. Just because a person is born with a propensity to have a lustful eye towards someone or something, that doesn't mean that it's okay. That means that that's your sinful nature, and you're going to have to work harder to overcome it. In the case of a transition regret, many are depressed until death and wonder how God could let this happen. So spiritually speaking, they're suffering because they're going, how could God let this happen to me? They're blaming it on God. They're blaming it on whomever. They're saying, nobody loves me. Why didn't somebody stop this? Why didn't my family or my teacher or my counselor? So they're suffering because they don't know if anybody loves them anymore. And many of them think that they're cursed. So these people aren't just suffering from ostracization or from, feeling like they don't belong. They're suffering from their own sinfulness, their own sinful nature. They're suffering physically, they're suffering mentally, and they're suffering emotionally and spiritually. They are a hurting group of people. They are in need of our compassion, and they're in need of our help. They're not in need of our acceptance. They're in need of our acceptance as a person. They're not in need of our acceptance in their behavior, because their behavior is what's causing the problem. To leave a person, so this is the last part, to leave a person in this state is not loving. They try to tell us that to love our neighbor or to love someone is to accept them for who they are. None of us really need to be accepted for who we are, do we? Because for who we are, there's a lot of sin in who we are. We need to be accepted for who God created us to be. That's who we need to accept people for who He says that they are. For the good things, for the things that He has planned for us, for the identity that He's given us. That's how we need to accept people. We don't apply this logic to any other hurting person when we say we need to accept them. They need help. It's their lifestyle that's killing them. It's not their lack of acceptance. And here are some of the ways that we can do that. Number one, it's not condemnation to say that the way that they're living is wrong. That's not condemnation. It's the truth. And the truth sets people free. Jesus said that. He said, if you abide in my word, you're truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to that sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The son remains in the house forever. So if the son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. These people need Jesus, and they need truth. They don't need someone to coddle them. They don't need someone to say everything you do is fine. That's not what they need. They need truth, and they need Jesus. They can receive forgiveness from God. And not only that, but what Satan intended for evil, God can use it for good. Their testimony can help other people. There's a scripture in Revelation that says that they overcame him. They overcame Satan by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. So the testimony of these people who have lived in the LGBTQ lifestyle, they can really change someone else's life just by sharing their testimony. Just by saying, hey, I was there once and I got out of it. And I'm happier now than I ever have been, and you can too. That testimony in and of itself could help someone get out of that lifestyle, and it could prevent someone from getting into it. Their sexual activity is not their identity, and they need to know that too. A person's identity is found in God. It's not found in sexual expression. We are who God says that we are. We're not who the world says that we are. We're not who our lifestyle says that we are. We are not who we think our sin creates us to be. We are who God says that we are. Even if a person was born that way, that doesn't make a difference. We're all born sinners, and we're all born with our own personal struggles. And many are born with a tendency for pride and anger and addiction, but in Christ, we are overcomers. And so we don't have to just fall under the weight of our own sin. But Jesus said he set us free from that. We don't have to live in those chains any longer. And in conclusion, this is a group of hurting people. They're hurting maybe more than anyone. And so we must have compassion on them. But compassion doesn't mean acceptance. It means getting the help that they need. That's what compassion is. We also need to protect our own children from this perversion. We need to be diligent and do what we can to shield and protect. And be a good example of what a healthy sexual relationship looks like. Marriage is important. Celibacy is important. Keeping our minds and our hearts pure is more important than ever. We need to watch clean movies. We need to have a clean computer. Ladies, we need to dress appropriately. And I have a whole soapbox about purity culture and about how it's not just a man's job to turn his head. It's our job to help him keep his head turned.
But
Yeah.
like clean movies, is it still okay if we watch like movies that might be like scary if you like know like wrong? Or like thrillers? Yeah.
Yes, I think you're going to be okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you know what a clean movie is,
I-
and not what's okay for you and what's not okay for you. Yeah, your mom can help you with that one.
Because I like movies like The Bodyguard and stuff like that because it's so good. And when I see that stuff, I'm like, I know it's wrong. And like, yeah. I'll never watch it.
Well, you have to realize that clean doesn't necessarily mean no love scenes or something like that. I think there's there can be clean love scenes and there can be non-clean love scenes. Because we do need a healthy example of what love looks like. But then I think we all, you can tell the difference between a movie a scene that was created to be edgy and push the limits, and a scene that's not. Like, what's going on in the scene without them having to show it to you. It's like a difference in a battle scene where somebody's arms and legs are being blown off and blood is splashing everywhere, and a battle scene that leaves out that kind of stuff. You still understand the ugliness of war without having to actually see somebody's brains blown out. I mean, it's a totally different situation. So, there were lots of good love scenes and good love movies, long before, in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, before they allowed full frontal nudity, in movies. But I think there's, we're talking about not just a little scene in a movie, but people are looking at full-on pornography on their computers and watching, it's popular now to watch an actual rape victim in porn, where they have a girl come in and they tell her that she's going to do a modeling shoot. And so she walks in to do the modeling shoot, and the whole time the cameras are running, and this man who is a porn actor comes and grabs the girl and rapes her on video. And then they put that on the internet for people to watch. And the girl is actually being raped. She'll be screaming the whole time, turn off the cameras, what's going on, why is this happening to me? And the whole time they're recording it with the full intention of sending it on the internet and making billions of dollars off of it. And billions of people will watch it. So this is the kind of stuff we're talking about, that is happening in our world today. And very little is being done to stop it. Very few parents know it's happening. And so very few parents will do anything to keep it off of their computer or their cell phone in their pocket. And they have no idea the level of the perversion that's happening in the culture these days. But I think the cleaner you can keep your mind, the better. So whatever you can do, or whatever you're willing to do. And the last thing is be prepared for persecution, even from the church. I get more pushback from left-leaning Christians than I do from the world. The world respects a person who has strong convictions. Even if they disagree with you, they respect your authentic, holding fast to what you believe. It's just like Jesus said about the lukewarm church. He said, be hot or be cold. Don't be lukewarm or I'll spit you out of my mouth. And I think the world feels the same way. They're like, you know what? Even though I disagree with you, I completely respect the fact that you have such strong convictions and you stick to them. And they respect, I've had more respect from people from the world, but the people in the church that are left-leaning Christians, they are mean and they will persecute you and they will use all kind of biblical references against you. And they will tell you that you're prudish, and they will tell you that you are a Pharisee, and they will use everything that they possibly can. They will say, you're not acting Christ-like, you're not being like Jesus, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And they are the ones that you really have to watch out for. So gird up your loins about you and be prepared to fight, even in the church. And I would say especially in the church, especially right now. Because there's splits taking place and people are drawing lines in the sand, and you're going to have to be willing to give up friends, maybe family, and the ones that are closest to you, because it's a vicious, vicious, vicious world out there, and the devil is not taking it lying down. So
I have to laugh because I looked up the word prude one time, and part of the definition was excellent woman.
wow, really?
It's in the Bible in Proverbs as like a good thing.
Kind of just have to laugh.
So yes, I am prudish. Thank you. I just take that as a compliment. One last, just to remind you, we are taking questions for next week. So anybody out there in internet land, send me your questions, and you guys too. If anything's burning on your mind, just let me know now, and I'll write it down, and we'll talk about it next time. And anyway, any more questions right for now on this topic? We're good? Okay, well, let me pray for us. Dear Father, this is a hurting group of people, and my heart goes out to them. They're probably the most hurting group in our culture today, and they are misunderstood and turned into TV characters, and there's a front that's put up, and we have this stereotype of these happy-go-lucky, LGBTQ people, and in reality, they are in the deepest depths of despair. They're trying their hardest to know who they are, and yet they're coming up empty. And it's no wonder that they feel like they've lost all hope, and they don't want to live anymore. And the world is trying so hard to keep them down into that hole that they've dug themselves into. And as much as the church is trying to drop them a ladder, and get them out of there, we are met with opposition in every single area that we have tried to reach them. And they have just propelled this lie that the church rejects them and doesn't want them there. And perhaps there have been people in the church in the past that have created this image. But God, those people are far and few between in this day and time. And I pray, Lord, that the church would use this opportunity to shine into the darkness of this community, of this group of people who are in such desperate need of love. And they need a true love, not this fake abandoning love that the world has for them, of you do it my way or else, and you're not wanted here unless you're one of us, and get behind the team and all of that. But we truly they can find their place in you because you created them and you gave them a purpose and you gave them an identity, not in their sexual behaviors and acts, but in deep down into the soul of who they are, God. And I pray that you would give us in the church the opportunity to introduce them to you, to show them who you are, to show them the person that can give them the purpose and the love, that covenant, that acceptance that they have so long desired and they don't know where to get it from. If you want to talk about a seeker, these are the seekers. These are the seekers of love, of true love, of agape love, of a deeper love than they could ever possibly find on this earth between a man or a woman or anyone else. But that this is something that is so far beyond the world in a deep spiritual sense. And we have the answer. And I pray, God, that you would give the church the courage to speak into the lives of these people, not to be afraid to turn them away, not to be afraid to offend them, because what we have is the answer to their problems. Whether it's offensive or not, it is the answer. And they will never get it unless we bring it to them. So give us the courage, Lord. Give us the overwhelming love. The kind of love that says, I have to tell you this truth, no matter how much it may hurt at the time. It is the answer to the problems. The gospel is the answer. Lord, I pray that you would make us proud of marriage, of family, that you would make us proud of these fundamentals that are in your word, not to be ashamed to believe in the nuclear family, not to be ashamed to have children and lots of children, not to be ashamed of being a wife, not to be ashamed of being a husband or a father or a mother. There's nothing in that is shameful. It's beautiful and it's wonderful, and it's the reflection of who you are. It's the reflection of your love for your people. I pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, Internet people, for joining us today.